I come from an area that is rural, connected not even really with North Carolina, and it's in North Carolina, but we might as well be part of Virginia because we are in the Virginia television market. And we have all sat in traffic on Interstate 64 in the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel many times. We have such a unique dynamic in Northeast North Carolina and on the Outer Banks, obviously because of our geography, because of our weather. Our three main modes of transportation includes ferries, includes, of course, highways and bridges that are under some of the most extreme stresses probably in the United States. The Bonner Bridge over Oregon Inlet, Highway 12 on Hatteras Island, which is the only way in and out for people who live there and who vacation there. We are not your typical, our radio stations are the only stations probably in the country that only do weekend traffic reports. Because on Saturday you've got about 200,000, 225,000 vehicles going basically to the same place, all leaving, getting back to New York and Washington, D.C., and all coming from those areas. So we are in a very unique situation, so I hope I can provide some information or answer some questions about when you're dealing with communicating with stations and outlets that are in very unique things that you don't normally see or hear in major metropolitan areas or even in rural areas because of the mix of the different things we have.
Bruce?
Well, thanks. By the way, when I turn this microphone on, I hear feedback, so I'm gonna, maybe that's okay. Maybe I can leave it on. I'll turn it off if it makes a terrible noise. I'm with the State Capitol newspaper, and we used to cover the entire eastern half of North Carolina, and we've pulled back to this triangle area primarily. And I have a weekly column. It's in the paper on Tuesdays. I have a blog, and I use Twitter. I don't use Facebook. And I find these are a good mix of things that complement each other and help me reach out to readers and with email, especially learn a lot about what readers need to know, what they need to know from DOT and other agencies on my beat. And if we didn't have online and didn't have digital feedback from people, I would be, I think, going blind because I wouldn't know what matters to drivers and what things work in transportation and what things don't. So I'm grateful for that, and I enjoy my beat.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Arcieri from the Triad Business Journal. I've been the transportation reporter there for almost 2 years, and in that time, the transportation beat has actually become one of the main beats for me. I'm writing anywhere from 1 to 4 stories, web stories or print stories a week on transportation, road projects that are coming to our area. So I'm very excited to be here today to help provide some insight on what I've learned here.
I'm Bruce Mildwurf with the CBS affiliate here based in Raleigh. And I've kind of taken a different path than Katie, because when I first came to WRAL in November 2007, I was brought in to handle the transportation beat. And that was my first beat, and that's what I was to focus on. And then a few months later, they added Department of Health and Human Services and Mental Health. And then a few months after that, they added, I think it was the environment and stuff like that. And then a year after that, it was the state legislature. And so where I was focusing on DOT and transportation issues and talking to the nice folks at DOT on a daily basis, we're, like so many others, doing more with less. And that means we're being spread out more to do other topics and be aware of more than just the beat. I mean, they still expect you to own what you are responsible for, but at the same time, you have to be so much more aware of everything else. And so I'm kind of relying on the sources and the contacts within the areas I'm in charge of to make sure I'm staying on top of things as much as I'm able to reach out on a daily, weekly basis. So it's kind of interesting how DOT and transportation is such an important piece for our viewers and for the area, but yet we're, because of everything else in the economy, having to we're thinning out, and so we're not able to put as much into it as we once did.
Are you ready for questions now? Okay.
I'll ask a question. Bruce, just following up with what you just said, what kinds of things are helpful for you all from us to help get the attention when you're so spread out, when there's so much to cover, so many stories with the proliferation of social media and everything? I mean, you guys, I can imagine having media as your job and having to follow that. Just for us, it's having it, trying to keep our hands on the pulse is overwhelming. So what can we do to try and cut through all of that noise to bring you guys stories of interest that are not niche stories, but are really going to appeal to your readers?
It's readers and viewers, because for TV it has to be. We try to make it so it's visual, so there's a visual piece to the story. But it's more than just a press release. You have to. Sometimes I wonder if you really want something covered, because it might just be a press release, because sometimes I send, and not just DOT, but in general, sometimes you send it out because you almost have to, so it doesn't look like you're kind of hiding something, but the details aren't there, and there was no reach out beyond that. And so I would say not only send a release and some information to the station, but how many, is everyone here part of the communications team?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so does everyone here have that contact at a station that if you needed something covered that you would call and get in touch with? Because that's critical. Because with everything going on, if you don't have that person in that morning meeting saying this is why it has to be covered, chances are it may not. And so it's a call to that person. It's an explanation as to, okay, well, we said there's going to be this board meeting, but here's what's going on in the board meeting. Because when people just see, board meeting taking place today from 10 to 3, it's okay, what else is going on today? But oftentimes, that's where you find out the real stories, but they're kind of buried in there. So it's a conversation and almost selling it to someone with details. Now, I will say our DOT did a great job. There was a big project on a major road here, I don't know, in the past year or so, and the press release is it was the story. I mean, it was, when we get a press release, we say to ourselves, well, what is the story? Well, the press release detailed it out. There was so many tons of asphalt and so many workers and this and that, and it was done in a clever way. Because I hate to say it, but reporters these days, not that they are getting lazier, but because we're so busy, it's easier to kind of see it and spell it out when it's there for you. Not that you have to do our job, but if you're looking for it to be covered, you have the information, well then, sell it and share it in a way that you can. We had a big story last week with funding for a brand new transportation hub. So people at the station saw a new transportation hub funding. Well, management right up said, okay, is this going somewhere?
No, go.
No, is this going to be broadcast out on always be careful when you have a microphone.
The truth will set you free.
No, but it was funding for a transportation hub. We're just going to send a photographer and take care of it. But I had conversations with the communications department before, and we talked about why it was so important and why it was so significant and how many people it truly impacts. So that we did send a photographer, but then when my story fell through that day, I was able to go to them and say, okay, we need to expand on this and really let people know how it impacts them. And although it was late in the day, we were able to turn a pretty good story on this brand new transportation hub. Now, without that conversation, am I doing that story? I don't know. It might be doubtful, but it's really reaching out and finding that one person and not selling, but having conversations about what's going on. And it's being available to do the good and the bad. If there's a controversial story that you're going to try to hide from, well then when that positive story comes, you may not get that coverage, I'm afraid to say. So it's being available, being fair, and reaching out.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, speaking of doing more with less, how do you feel about the regular traditional commercial media, press, broadcast, versus or not versus, social media, which in our industry, we want to get information out fast and often, yet we want positive, and we know that's not usually what the local media are looking for to call a story, but we can go direct now, and we can tweet, and we can get to everybody with our messages. What do you think about that?
And real quick, before you answer that, I want to expand on that too, because we had this conversation. We had a conversation this morning with someone that was here about that exact thing. In one particular agency, they are spending less time with reporters. Specifically said that perhaps doesn't really respect those deadlines anymore and should instead focus their effort on social media to get their word out instead of spending the time with traditional media. What do you think those two roles are and how they work together?
Well, I'm not sure why it needs to be either or, but I mean, I learn about things from the North Carolina DOT and other agencies that I cover from email, from phone calls, from tweets, and sometimes I'll pick up on one before I notice the other. And you know, because I follow Twitter feeds from different agencies, and some of them are productive and informative, and some are not. I guess I don't know what. I mean, I hope you won't stop.
Yeah, the conversation was more on, gosh, should we, and I'm not saying, I certainly don't think that a lot of us in this room are advocating for this. This was just one person's kind of viewpoint on it, that, should we be respecting these deadlines, working really hard to get stuff to traditional media, because sometimes it does take hours to get the right information, to answer questions, to get the right data, or do we bypass that and instead shape the stories through social media to come out like we want them to come out versus giving up some of that control for traditional stories, which is more from a resource standpoint?
Well, I wouldn't say, because social media, we've all embraced it. I mean, every bit of the broadcast industry, the print industry has had to embrace social media because, one, it's another way to reach our listeners and our readers. Two, it's another way for us to get stories. And trying to mold a story the way we want to is fine, but then, for example, Facebook, there's a big problem right now with local governments trying to regulate Facebook pages. So we have that issue in our coverage area right now with 2 counties that are trying to debate, do we just have Facebook pages and it allows citizens to just comment any way they want and they don't have the staff or the time to regulate it. So, you open yourself up to a lot of problems there. But as far as trying to respect deadlines, as long as he's got to be on the air at 5 p.m. and he's got to have a publication ready to go to print at 11 o'clock and I have to have a newscast ready at 6 a.m., there's always going to be deadlines. So, you still have to respect those traditional deadlines, even with social media now being, so predominant in our industry and in the way that you get your message out.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you you have to respect what we do, because that's up to you. But if you choose not to, it's not as if we're not going to do the story. So by working with us, you are still shaping your message. By not working with us on the 6 o'clock news, if there's something going on, and DOT would not return our calls and had no comment. Now, you have a choice. However you want to portray your agency is up to you. Now, like Bruce said, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do your social media, but at the same time, we have a job, and it also depends on the reach you want. I mean, I don't know how many Twitter followers you have. But I know as far as, our website, there are millions and millions of page views a month, and, our viewing area, we're a top 25 market, so for whether it be a newspaper, radio in the Outer Banks, or, for TV in the Triangle, the reach is pretty vast. But ultimately it's up to you, you want to control the message. But that doesn't mean you can control the story, and it doesn't mean it's going to go away.
In the way back.
I think where it's headed, and the question for you all there is that communication professionals and transportation professionals and project professionals can become their own project user. They can deliver the news in all these mediums that we have available to us: social media, are you seeing that as all these new tools and how to communicate, are you seeing that as a threat to your job reaching the public, where it was more traditional 5 years ago, we were the messenger. Now you're not dealing with messengers. We can become our own messengers through all these tools when they're done correctly. So my question is, are you seeing that as maybe a challenge to the industry from an advertising revenue perspective, from a staff perspective?
But was the question that your agency could have its own type newsroom?
Yeah, for an agency, for a project, with all these communication tools out there, we don't necessarily need the media always to be the messenger of the news when there's ways to reach people directly. So my question to you all is, how is that, because it's not going away, it's only going to become more robust how people are communicating directly. So how does that impact you all?
I think we're always going to be the independent, objective voice for our readership. You're going to be crafting the message in your own way with your, several social media channels, but we're always going to be able to provide that independent, objective voice and be able to expand on the significance of an issue, for our specific readers. So.
And at the same time, trying to create your own newsroom, I will give you 2 examples in the last month where that obviously didn't work. One was in southeastern Virginia with the closing of a bridge tunnel complex and a drawbridge that shut down traffic. And I was sitting in that traffic for 3 hours myself trying to get from Wisconsin. What's that? Okay. And just this past weekend in Wilmington, a situation where the communication wasn't there, and trying to communicate through us. Your job is to communicate through us in the end, because we've got listeners and we've got readers who are trying to get this information, and all of a sudden, boom, why am I sitting because this drawbridge is closed all day for 3 days? So, that word didn't get out. So, yes, social media has expanded our reach and our ability to collect news, because I'm a one-man news operation. I am one man running a newsroom for 8 radio stations, and just so happen to work with a 3-man operation running our website, our online newspaper. We rely on, I just got an email from the ferry division here just a short time ago about a schedule change that started today. That's a story tomorrow, because I've got to have all that stuff. So at the same time, you can't rely on just trying to go into these new media outlets, because they aren't established yet with traditional listeners and viewers and readers. They still rely on that 6 o'clock newscast. They still rely on that 6 a.m. newscast, and they still rely on that paper in their box at 6 a.m.
And to add to that, did you want to say, are you responding to that?
It might make it easier for everyone.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm Lauren Hanson from VDOT. I disagree just about the comment from the two river crossings, because it was on the 6 o'clock news on all 3 channels, and it still happened.
It still happened, but it's still, and it's up to the listener, the reader, and the viewer. They got to take some responsibility as well. At the same time, there would have been more. I don't want to get in this argument now. I could have said there should have been more message boards on 64 about Richmond and to come down 460. I'll get into that.
Let me just say one thing along those lines in our recent experience in Wilmington, because there was part of the message delivered, maybe not everywhere. Well, obviously not everywhere it could have been delivered, and this is something I'd love to hear the panel respond to as creative communicators. One of the biggest challenges I think all of us face is that we live in a world now where people are inundated with information. And so you're inundated with information on your phone, on your computer, on the radio, on TV, with the newspaper. So the question is, we send out a notice, we send out a press release, we say this is what we're going to do. It was covered by some TV stations, and the newspaper didn't have all the information, and that's our bad. We've admitted that, but the question is, what can we do on our end to have a better partnership with you all, so that when there is an issue like this, we find every way to elevate it to the point that the communication is pushed out through every avenue. Because, like, we can't call everybody, right? We can't robocall everybody like, hey, don't go in the tunnel. I mean, that's not really going to work.
Schools, it works.
I mean, yeah, but you see, my point is, my question to you, and we'd love those ideas and thoughts about how you all would work with us or how we can work with you. I mean, it was on the news. Okay, does it need to be on there more? Did it need to be on there? Should we, did it need to start way in the back and remind? Does it just need to be a big splash? I mean, what's your experience with your audience of how do we take our message and not just communicate it, but have it actually be impactful?
Well, to some degree, it's the little things. I mean, everything you put out needs to be clear and concise and relevant, and timely. And one thing that I often, if there's an announcement about a road closing or a construction delay or something that'll affect a lot of drivers, I like to put it on my blog with a map, a Google map. And I think everybody should use Google Maps, because anything transportation, it's happening in a particular location, and if you just show people where it is, they've learned a lot more about it. I don't have better answers than that. Certainly, the North Carolina DOT is going to have a huge challenge next year, starting next year for 3 years. I understand you guys had a session on Carmageddon today. That's a drop in the bucket. There's going to be a 3-year slowdown on one of the busiest roads around Raleigh for 3 years. A 4 or 5 lane road reduced to 2 lanes at a time for months at a time, 120,000 cars a day. And they're going to have a huge challenge in helping people cope with that. And I don't think they're going to be up to it. I don't know if anybody can be up to it. But I'll be looking to augment what they do with my own stuff. When there was a huge screw up on Interstate 40 in Durham County here a few years ago, and it was freshly paved with bad concrete that had to be ripped out a couple of years later and replaced, I created our own website to give people, and people subscribe to daily email updates that I sent out, because the way DOT communicated with people wasn't good enough quite to give them the options and the information they needed about how to avoid trouble. Next year, it's going to be much worse than that, and they're going to spend a lot of time thinking about doing things better than they've ever done before, and so on.
And two, there's something that's going on because of shrinking newsrooms and shrinking staffs in media because of everything that's going on and the changes going on, like social media. In my business in radio, if you have a situation on a weekend, unless you have a direct contact with a management person or someone like myself, a news director, you can't just call the hotline at the radio studio. Nobody's there to answer, because every station in the country now is automated. I think that was one of the problems that happened with the Hampton Road situation a couple of weeks ago, was that you're dealing with radio, and radio being the primary form of communication, when you're in a car, there weren't anybody there to answer the phone. And unfortunately, that's the case, and you have to have relationships, better relationships with key people on staffs. And I know you can't do that with every single solitary radio station in a market. It's just not possible. But at the same time, you have to, you have your contacts with TV, you have your contacts with print, but you do need to have that management person. You need to have not just the reporter that you may deal with on a daily basis. You need to have that contact information with a management person, because of the situations now where you've got a breaking, major situation that you need to get on the air. You need to be able to call a program director or a station manager at times. And you can establish that with the people that, that you work with every day in those newsrooms, as small as they are. But having that contact information in a key moment can be the difference between, the situations that we're talking about.
Can I ask a quick question? Bruce touched on what frustrates him in terms of incomplete press releases, those kind of things. As journalists, what frustrates you the most, like at a press conference or getting press releases? What frustrates you most about the job that we do on this end and trying to communicate with you? And each of you, if you could answer that.
I mean, off the top of my mind, off my head, I would say the lack of facts. you know, when we go to a press conference, I mean, to me, it's just kind of common. You would think it would be common knowledge that we're at this event. We're not going to just tell them what it is, but we're going to give them a fact sheet. You know, what is the cost?
Is that part of your deadline deal that you asked us to, you know, you want things as fast as you can get them, and one of our lines is we'll get all the facts and we'll get them out, and it's not soon enough. We shouldn't be calling a news conference, as far as I'm concerned, until we've got all the information. But depending on what that news is, if it's breaking, governor says we got to get on it, you know, you'll get what we got. But what else? This is a good question, but to me that's a deadline thing. You're usually wanting info we don't have yet.
It's a deadline thing, and it's basic information thing. I mean, if it's a story, there's a reason for it. There's a reason you're calling a press conference or having an event, and to me it's just basic to have, you know, the who, what, where, when. I mean, that's usually taken care of, but then the why and the impact, the cost, the distance, and often it's, you know, not often, sometimes it's we'll have to get back to you, or, you know, let's say it's just a photographer that's there that doesn't know to ask the questions. A simple handout would be nice, so that, you know, we're not having to follow up on just the simple stuff that would help shape and finish the story.
Wait 1 second. Can we let the other three finish the question in the back, and then we'll circle back around? Because the question was, what is it that what can we do as professionals on our side of the desk to help, you know, what do we do that is counterproductive? I'm going to say it much nicer than Micah. But, you know, what are the things that you find to not be effective? And so, Katie, if you could answer a couple of those real quickly. But they all relate to other departments.
And jumping off of what he said, you know, just the facts aren't enough anymore. We're trying to differentiate ourselves more than ever. We're getting competition from other news sources more than ever. So, you know, throwing up, you know, on the web, you know, what just the facts are. We need to know the impact. We need to know the whys of the whys. We need to know the significance of this. How can we advance the story forward and get more in depth? Those kinds of facts and details are something that we're really going to want to need to advance the story further.
I don't have many complaints. I deal with a lot of really good, you know, public information folks in a number of agencies, but certainly things I'd like to see occasionally, things that occasionally fall short at one agency or another. It's just, you know, getting me in touch with someone who can communicate in English and is self-conscious about spitting out jargon and you know, the initials of things and engineering speak. That's a big help, and I know it's, and I'm sure it's often a challenge for folks in your job to help the people that you work for, you know, speak English. Otherwise, it's a great thing that more and more agencies are also doing a better job of, but you still want to aim higher. Is that I hope you folks are your own agency's resident experts on your public information laws in your states, your open meeting laws, and your public records laws, so that you know, because as reporters, we continually we're like training new agencies about, no, you really do have to give us that document because the law says you do, and you know, you don't need to repeat that every week. And the bureaucrats and the engineers that work for you aren't the experts on it, but I imagine they rely on you, or they should rely on you to help them fulfill their responsibility for open government. And reporters, of course, aren't just reporters, but citizens too, should be able to rely on you to expedite open government requests.
And on that, on the open government side of it, I mean, we do realize that you do work for political appointees and former or wanting to be elected officials. And Politico speak shows up in a lot of press releases when they come from state agencies. It's constant. You have to weave through that stuff to find the meat and potatoes of the actual story. That helps, you know, and I understand that's, you know, the person up top is saying, you've got to put this in that press release, and you got to say that at this press conference, and you can't answer that. But helping educate those who you work for in administration to understand and remember open meeting laws and sunshine laws and those things like that, that all this stuff is public record, and you can't hide it, because if you hide it, you actually make our job harder, and then when we communicate with you, it's a little less friendly. You've probably run into that with, when you've had something that you weren't allowed to give out, but it turns out we know better. Not to say we know better, but we know that you have to give that. Yeah, we do know better. We do.
Well, and I will say, just as an aside, that speaking English, and y'all know this with engineers, we had an engineer early on when I had gotten here who did an interview with this Bruce and got very technical. We walked out and he said to me, "You don't think I did very well?" And I said, "Well, nobody knows what aggregate is. It's a rock, So he goes, "Well, there are different kinds of rocks." We walk outside to do an interview with that Bruce, and Jim Trogdon begins to give an answer that only a civil engineering professor would know. And for the first time in my entire life, I stopped an interview. I was like, time out, stop. I said, "It's a rock." And then Bruce called me later, and he was like, "Oh my God, the first half of that interview, no one could understand a word that man said." I'm so glad you stopped it. But yeah, so we try with our people.
And you know what? Do you all know what a bent is, correct? Everybody in this room probably has been familiar with what a bent is. We learned on the Outer Banks what a bent was because of the NCDOT telling us what we call the temporary forever bridge over Pea Island on Hatteras Island. We learned more about bents. I learned what a dolphin was just 2 weeks ago. What's a dolphin? Who knows in here what a dolphin is? You guys know what a dolphin is.
It's the kind of fish that goes in the
No, and it's not a mahi either. It's not a mahi-mahi. It's the pilings, the big stack of pilings cabled together so a ferry boat can bump into it. My listeners learned what a dolphin was 2 weeks ago. Sometimes technical terms are fun, but at the same time, give me something else to describe what this is. So in my 10 seconds, I have to tell what a dolphin is and why they're shutting the ferry down for 3 days.
We have just a couple more minutes for questions, so I'm going to start right here because you waited very patiently. And
the discussion about press conferences and press events, I was wondering how you felt as to whether or not they're an overused tool in the business, because I feel like the moment you hold a press conference, you're basically starting a race to everybody's deadlines, and you get into situations where you can't go deep on details, and it's just everybody's got straight away. And sometimes I feel like people are forcing us, not you forcing us, but other constituents are saying, "Well, we have to do an event for this." Well, why? Because if we could get the top newspaper and the top 2 electronic media outlets on a short media tour, then we wouldn't have to do this talk and pony show, and we can get more done. So I guess I've just expressed my opinion. But how do you guys feel about press conferences?
are they beneficial or are they not? Press events.
I think it depends on what it is. I mean, if it's a ribbon cutting, I don't know, unless it's something major, I don't know if we're covering those. If it's something that everyone is calling about, well, then it's probably easier for you. But if if it's one outlet, 2 outlets calling, then I probably think a one-on-one is better. And I just think it depends on what it is and who wants it and the impact involved. And I mean, last week with this transportation hub, I think you had to have a press conference. And there were a lot of people that were going to be there for it. But if it's, just something else.
We do media avails, I think, though, more than press conference. Yeah. At least we do that now.
I think that works well.
We just, take our highway administrator and say he's available to answer questions on X at this time, and then people show up, media outlet shows up or they don't. I mean, I don't know if y'all find that beneficial. It helps us.
Yeah, I'm not invited to many press conferences. I don't have a strong feeling about whether they're overused. If I were covering the legislature and political, I think, and campaigns, it's more of a common thing. I just don't see it much on my beat.
Yeah, we don't do much.
And I don't think they're obsolete, but we usually know what is going to happen before that press conference is held, so we can jump on the story before that happens. So we pretty much know what's going to happen.
and we're in such a distant area. The only time a press conference happens in our part of the world is when Hurricane Irene comes through and blows everything out, and the governor shows up and does something. That's about all we get as far as press conferences with state agencies. More ours are local, and again, it's usually media availability with our groups if you can even get them to talk to you.
And typically, if it's a real story, the press conference is not the story. The press conference is the information, and then you take it elsewhere and delve in deeper, and that becomes the story. So,
Randy?
Yeah, Sam, I wish this was for you, because that's the only name I can pronounce up there. This is probably less for you, more for the others. I get frustrated. I see a real blurring of the lines between hard news and opinion these days. And I think, no offense to anybody up there, I think blogging is a big part of that. I think the public has a hard time discerning sometimes what's hard news and what's opinion. What are y'all's thoughts? I mean, in your perspective, are those lines getting harder and harder? Is there more of a blurring between hard news and opinion in your reporting?
Gee, I don't know. I have a blog and I have a weekly column, and I exercise my license to put my slant on things a little more on my blog and a little more on my column than I would in a regular news story, but not much.
Does the public see that difference?
I don't know. I can't think of a. I mean, you're describing something that's a huge issue everywhere. It's like the air we breathe. And I mean, I hope that I can help, and I think I can help give people objective information, and sometimes let them know, you know, add some spice to it just a little bit. But it's not like I don't feel like I'm, you know, Fox and Friends or you know, somebody else with a huge slant to push.
I think Bruce does a great job with his blog because it's not necessarily it's usually not a slam on someone. It's just information in a different way. But personally, I've chosen not to blog because I do find that many bloggers, to make it interesting, have to take a side or a slant or an angle and kind of just take it a little farther. And I don't think that's my job as a neutral party. And so I haven't done that, and I try to keep it just to my on-air piece, or, you know, then we have a web team that'll put it on the web. But I do see that blogging takes it to, you know, there's that line, you know, it often goes beyond that line, and then it's kind of hard after that to watch or read a report that's supposed to be neutral when you kind of know how they personally feel, and then so it's tricky. It is. That's why.
Okay, we got time for one or two more. So, yes. I'm sorry, Kate.
I'm pretty new in my job, and our deputy secretaries, when I'm doing press releases, sometimes they want me to release, I think, way too much extra information. Like, we recently got $20 million in extra funds, and they want each of the 6 district engineers to outlay 6 projects each. And I'm thinking that's going to be like a 4-page press release. And I'm telling them, you know, let's make it short, concise, and then if, you know, maybe put a link to a website where the press can, you know, click to see, you know, where that money's going in each district. I mean, what's your all's opinion? Too much information?
Well, I would say we don't really, I mean, time is an issue, and so to make us do work and delve in more and dive in more is sometimes counterproductive. If you have 6 regions, you can send 6 different releases to the regions, so you have the summary, and then the 6 projects are listed for the region that they care about. I mean, personally, I don't care about, well, I care, but
Not really.
but as far as, you know, doing a story that day, if it's, you know, west of Charlotte, 3 hours, 4 hours away, that's not something I'm going to cover that day. And so if it is a 4-page release, I may not go through that. But if it's a 1-page with a summary, and then here are the ones you might care about, I think that would be, personally, I think that would be best.
And there was one. All right, this is the last question, back in the back.
I have a question. I'm from Washington, D.C., and there's a kind of a time-honored tradition there of when you have a story that's coming out, or you have an event or something big, then everybody else is kind of following in their footsteps. Does that happen here? How do you guys feel about that? Because I've seen press conferences where it became about the fact that the reporters were complaining about the fact that the Washington Post had gotten it before everybody else. So I'm just curious how you all feel about that. Some of you may benefit from that, and others may not.
I only like it when we're the ones that have it first.
Yeah, I have the same mixed feeling.
And the News Observer and WRAL, we all follow them. We just chase them down because we're out in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, if they get it first, it's pretty, you know, we kind of accept that.
Well, I mean, I will say in closing, thank you, all of you, for being here. Some interesting things that that we actually got to hear. I appreciate Google Maps. You're talking about Google Maps,
Yeah.
Bruce, with your, I think that's something we definitely, is anybody here on my team? Raise your hand. Now it's a new rule. So we'll look for more Google mapping. But I do think it was an interesting conversation. I think that we'll all have to continue to talk about it. I mean, we live in a world where people expect their news instantaneously, and the question is, are they going to believe it more if it comes just from us, or are they, if you have your own news station and you're pushing it out, where's that trust level, and how are people going to feel about it? Anyway, those are very interesting things. So I do want to, if I could, thank all of our panelists for taking time out of their busy day reporting to come here and be with us. Thank you. And then Randy Damron from West Virginia and Jim Barron would come up, please. I think you guys have some details that you would like to give us real quickly.
Absolutely. I promise not to take too much time because I think all's between us and barbecue is us, so we'll get right on with that. It seems apparent that perhaps all of you have, back in your homes, have favorite reporters, and maybe some not so favorite reporters. Boy, this media panels has been special here at Transcom this year. Appreciate your all's time. But what Jim and I are here to talk about real quickly is the opportunity to form a partnership between Transcom and ATSA. And ATSA, American Traffic Safety Services Administration, first got in my targets back about 4 or 5 years ago, and I started working with Jim on work zone safety, and I know most of you do that as well. So Jim, tell us what ATSA is.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Next slide, please. You might want to bring down the lights because we do have a short video that's going to be coming up here in just a moment. But I'm Jim Barron. I'm with American Traffic Safety Services Association. Just a little bit about our association. We're headquartered in Fredericksburg, Virginia. We have 1,800 national and international members who manufacture and install roadway safety devices. That's signs, stripes, guardrails, etc. Next, please. We also have nationwide training for roadway workers, flaggers, and certification. And ATSA is one of the 3 original founding members of National Work Zone Awareness Week. We signed an agreement back in 1999 with the Federal Highway Administration and AASHTO to conduct this event every year in April. And you know the purpose, of course. And it started out very slow in 2000, and now just about everybody in this room does something with National Work Zone Awareness Week. So we were one of the founding members of that. And we also have technical committees which meet twice a year, once at our mid-year meeting and then at the Traffic Expo, which is our annual convention. Next slide. And one of those committees within ATSA is called the Safety and Public Awareness Committee, which Randy's a member of. Next, please.
Yeah, it's called SPA, and here's how this affects you. At the February meeting, it was mentioned it became a good idea to have Transcom members submit a reporter from your hometown, maybe a regional reporter or a national reporter that has produced a story, something positive about transportation safety, roadway safety awareness. And we'd like to recognize this member of the media. And a positive news story, you know those positive news stories versus the ones that weren't so good. But if you have the opportunity when you talk to your reporters, you could inspire them to say, look, there's this new national award being presented in February next year. It's a national award, and you could be the recipient. We need the nominations by November the 2nd, back to ATSA. And the SPA committee will select 3 finalists from all the applications, and then the ATSA, I believe, board of directors will select the winner. And we mentioned on the SPA committee, Bob Felt from the Michigan DOT would like to have an opportunity to have an insert on this presentation as well.
Thanks, Randy and ATSA. Hello, Transcom. I am in jail, but shooting a work zone safety video. Have you ever been interviewed by the media, reported the facts, and out came a not-so-favorable story? Well, this National Media Award focuses on a positive news story and sheds a positive light on roadway safety. This is going to be a big deal, and you can help us find a deserving reporter in radio, TV, newspaper, and even online. Can you think of anyone that's done something positive about roadway safety? Do you know someone that maybe by November 2nd could do a positive news story? As transportation communication professionals, you know the media, and you're the perfect folks to ask. Jot down some ideas, make some mental notes, and consider filling out a nomination form before November 2nd. Thanks, and have a great conference. And now back to you, Randy.
Bob Felt really was filming a National Work Zone Safety commercial in jail back in Michigan.
Okay, next slide, please. Now, the nice thing about this award is whoever wins this award, we're going to pay them an all-expenses-paid trip to San Diego, California in February 2013. We're going to fly them out there, put them up in a nice hotel, feed them for a couple of days. Hang on just a second.
You knew that was coming.
The award is going to be presented at our opening general session, and there's going to be about 650 people in attendance at this thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to release a national press release announcing this reporter and announcing the award, and we're also going to of course publicize the DOT that nominated him as well. Next slide. So again, the deadline is November the 2nd, and you have the forms there. So I think that's it.
Unless there are any questions.
Any questions? Yeah. Well. Yes.
Actually, it's more of a comment.
Yes.
I know so often we hear, oh, try to make it positive, try to, be positive with this. Ultimately, I think the goal should be to be fair.
Absolutely.
And
just get it correct, get it accurate.
That's fine.
And if you're fair, I think that, ultimately, when I'm told thank you for that fair story, that's, from either side, that's the goal, not necessarily just a positive spin.
I agree.
I think it's got to be columnist. What we're asking here is for an editorial. You can't expect the news people to do our PR for us.
I think, though, I'm going to disagree. I think that if there is a story about how median barrier program in North Carolina in the past 15 years have decreased highway deaths by, from 50 to 2, or, and whatever it is, I made those numbers up, but they are good numbers. And they do a fair story, even if they talk to the person who says, I hate the cable barriers. If the story's fair, I still think that's a positive story about highway safety.
Well, right, it's just the word, I'm just changing the word.
Yeah.
It covers the issue.
I'm not going to compete in a contest for a positive news story. I'm not.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it seems that it's incumbent upon all of us to do something really, really unimpeachably good between now and November.
No. Was there a question in the back? Okay, anything else?
Thank you very much.